Well, it's good to see you, Jennifer and Charlie. I know we've been looking forward to this conversation for some time, and with 2023 having been the year of AI and all of the anticipated anticipation that goes with that for what's going to happen this year, big conversation around what does that mean for senior executives across industries, for the C-suite and the functions they lead, as this is expected to be a new level of disruptive technical innovation, maybe on the scale of the PC itself, or the internet, or I want to avoid being hyperbolic, but when we look at statistics and research, PwC estimating almost $16 trillion of economic activity by 2030. McKinsey says 13 trillion. University of Pennsylvania working with OpenAI, 80% of roles are going to be automated, at least 10%. You've got 20% of folks that may have 50%, up to 50% of their tasks automated by the end of the decade. This is going to fundamentally alter business and the knowledge worker. And so to get together with a series of folks to explore what does this mean for senior management and their responsibility in managing successfully their organization and their teams and their customers through this transition. My name is Rob Holland, 25 years in digital transformation. Excited to be in a position to help companies shepherd through this transition, and working with partners and colleagues like Jennifer and Charlie. Hand it over to you for a brief introduction, and then we can get it kicked off.
Great. Now let me jump in there. Thanks, Rob. I'm really grateful to be here as well among two experts in the field. My name's Jennifer Agnes. I am the managing director of the Cynozure Group in the US, which is a data and analytics strategy company. Having spent many, many years in data as a chief data officer and as a risk officer as well through the course of my career. Happy to be here to talk about this material change in how we think about the future and how to navigate this landscape as we go forward. And we're really happy, Charlie, to have you here. I'll turn it to you to give a little intro. And having you on board is really, with the broad perspective you had and your career, really great to start our series of conversations off with your vast and broad expertise. So, Charlie?
Well, thanks, Jennifer and Rob. Always good to be with you both. And I'm Charlie Stack. I'm based in the New York office of Spencer Stuart, where I lead our global data and AI practice. As Jennifer knows, because I've been trying to call her to recruit her for 10 or 15 years, I've spent a lot of time very specifically in this space, which is somewhat unique, I think, to people in leadership advisory and exec search. So seen lots of the evolution, and Rob, I would agree. This last year has been unlike any other in the space. The topic of data, kind of first got hot, during the financial crisis, when it was, sort of more about the defensive side of data. So clean up your data, get your data organized. This last year, I think finally we've seen, most of the world wake up to just how much potential there is, surrounding this new asset that we've created through the digital revolution called data. And I mean, gosh, Rob, like thinking about the trillions of dollars in the future that people may or may not spend on this. I mean, you don't even have to look to the future. I mean, the businesses that I'm speaking with, CEOs and boards that I'm speaking with, the level of commitment that they have this year. I mean, you don't need to be a mathematician to very quickly calculate that we're going to be spending hundreds of billions of dollars on AI, just in the next year globally, right? So it's an exciting moment, and I'm equally jazzed to be here talking about it with you both.
Well, Charlie, Jennifer, and I are really excited to open this series of conversations with you, specifically because the experience you have working with management teams and leadership development as they think through how to evolve and grow as the market dictates, changes. And in an environment where it sounds like collectively we believe that by the end of this decade, the nature of business is going to look very different. What is the call to action, therefore, for senior management teams to rise to this occasion, to represent not only the threats but many opportunities that this presents them?
Like, you can make this really complicated, and I think lots of leadership teams, will go down various rabbit holes, that, I mean, and they already are, right? And, Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, lots of people report on this. Still a very low percentage of, investments that businesses are making in AI are yielding the sort of scaled returns that we hope for. The reason for that, which, I've deduced through, a few years of research with the Return on AI Institute and Tom Davenport and Lax Srinivasan over there, is that this has a lot less to do with, underwriting investments in technology anymore. Most businesses have the technical capability necessary to get value out of AI. The real challenge is actually that senior leadership teams aren't investing in the people and process change necessary to extract the value from those capabilities. The punchline is getting value out of AI requires your entire organization to operate very differently and to work very differently. And we're not really making investments in that kind of change. I think most of the C-suites that I observe are kind of looking at AI as this, chat GPT tool that we can get to do stuff for us, right? But they're looking at it kind of the same way that we looked at, moving to a digital, market in financial services. We took the same process that, people had done for centuries, where a person ran a stock certificate across the street, and we just encoded that in zeros and ones, right? We didn't actually bother to completely rethink, well, how should the exchange of, a share actually work in a world where we have computers, right? So as a result, the kind of process is really still unchanged many years later, if you kind of dig beneath it. And we haven't really gotten tons of, you could argue, because of market efficiencies and speed of market, there's a lot more value in financial services, but we haven't gotten the really big, open access to securities, and it hasn't fundamentally shifted the way that financial markets work. A place like financial markets, that's probably somewhat on purpose, right? We're sort of allergic to change there. But in the world at large, organizations that really want to get value out of this and they really want to be winners, the analogy I use is we're spending lots of money building rocket ships, and we're spending virtually nothing on training astronauts. So we're not going to send anybody to the moon because a rocket ship, doesn't operate itself.
Well, it might with Gen AI, you don't know, but I guess I would say, I think it's a great example because I've seen and experienced that type of feeling from the community that I am involved in the data community, in actual businesses where it became a hurry up and do AI, what are we doing in AI? Because it was the flavor of the month, if you will. And the people I was working with, the actual data leaders, were frustrated and struggling because they already had a strategy. They were moving along at pace, delivering what the priorities were, the objectives were. They see this as an enhancer to expedite what they were trying to do, not to stop everything and do something else. And I think that's the juxtaposition that a lot of our colleagues and peers are struggling with, is how do you convince the board? How do you get the leaders to know that it's not stop this and do that? We all know those conversations where whoever is the loudest, most senior person in the room and says, go do, you're kind of going to go do that. But really the people that are understanding it, the data people, the experts, are going, this is going to make things easier, faster, quicker to turn around. But it's not new. We've been automating things with AI for 10 years already, right? Like automation, robotics, this is automation. I've felt it. We felt it in the industry, in the market, and the people I talk to all the time, that they're sort of stuck. So how do we shift? How do we get the boards? How do we get the leaders that maybe aren't as fluent in data as some of us to see that this is not new? This can be really useful to growing faster, more efficiently, but it may not be just a new thing, right? Like, and how do we go about that? What have you guys seen in that negotiation or that influencing that you've got to do to shift the mindset?
Well, I think what we're highlighting is, as much as it started to sound like in 2023 things were different, really, how different are they? We're still in a world where technology investment, absent of culture change, is going to yield very poor results. That's why so many of the digital transformations that people embark on have really struggled to return on the investment that they went through. And it's also true that we've been doing AI for, a couple decades. I mean, gosh, it was in the 50s when all the research started to come out in machine learning and predictive analytics, and many of these things are pretty mature. So I guess the question that raises for me is, what did change in 2023, and are boards and management teams connecting to the significance of what that is? And I think what it might be, I'm curious to hear from both of you, is it really was this breakthrough in generative AI, when for the first time as humans we saw that in our natural language we could interact with information systems and applications and the corpus of knowledge for our enterprise, when put together appropriately. And this opens all kinds of possibilities for the expansion of human cognition, productivity, research, and just any number of new ways to automate across our businesses. And it's because of this specific type of breakthrough within AI that's been going on for a long time, that you heard some of the statistics we talked about at the outset of this call, but also just to continue to pile on. Goldman Sachs in their research thinks 2/3 of occupations are going to be impacted now by AI. We've really entered a new realm, we'll call it maybe a new S-curve of disruptive innovation in this AI space. And Charlie, if what we just said is true, then the need for culture change is even greater, order of magnitude greater than the kind of culture change you needed to roll out, say, a new CRM system.
Maybe a simple way to think about, I think, the gap that exists today is, I think it's really an L&D gap. It's a learning and development gap in organizations. I've just watched, what learning and development has gotten boiled down to in many organizations, for cost reasons, for a whole bunch of good reasons, is, kind of one approach to learning. So, it's the, hey, there's a new compliance regulation that you need to know about. Watch this, webinar, or read this thing and take a quiz and certify that you know the answers now to the new compliance thing. That kind of format is very effective for the learning and development related very specifically to knowledge acquisition. Do you know a thing or not know a thing, right, from a book? The kind of paradigm shift that we are talking about, though, requires a very different kind of learning that most organizations aren't very good at. And the analogy that I use, there's this really fun YouTube video that people can look up called The Backward Bicycle. Okay, and it's this guy built a bike that when you turn the handlebars to the left, the front wheel actually goes to the right. Okay, and I could take a webinar and learn the mechanics of how that works and understand the mechanism, and I can conceptualize that. Okay, and I get on the bike and I have to, go this way to go this way. It turns out that this guy has flown around the world with this bicycle. The better you are at riding a regular bike, the more impossible it is for you to even do one pedal stroke on the backwards bicycle. And it's because in practice, riding a bike is this really complex, internally like intuitive set of counterbalances that that human intelligence is really good at doing, right? Like I learn how to play a really complex role in a complex organization. Over time, there's so much stuff that you do in your job during the day, especially if you're a knowledge worker, that you don't even think about anymore. It's just intuitive, right? Like it's just, you're on that bicycle and you don't think about like all the counterbalances that need to happen that allow you to do that at the end of the day. You maybe think about, I want to go over here, I want to go over here, but all the little stuff's gotten internalized. And it turns out that it's really hard to shift stuff that's like become so internalized, right? Like the operational mechanisms of like, how do I do my job? It's really hard to shift that. And it requires a different kind of learning. So when we go into organizations and we start to look at like from the top down, how do you start to really operate differently as a data-driven organization? We talk about the drip and the drill, right? So it's important for people to learn like the book stuff about like, what is AI? How does it work? All that stuff's great. Theoretical, conceptual. It's important people that, that even at the leadership level that people understand like, well, ChatGPT seems like this magic thing that has intelligence, but it's very different than ours. It's just a mega statistical model behind it. And it's important that you understand that because it doesn't actually really know what it's spitting out. It's literally just the world's most sophisticated next word generation engine. That's it, right? If you want to actually start to operate differently around that knowledge, now you need to drill, right? You need to create an environment. You can learn how to ride the backward bicycle, but you need to set up, a little safe road with no cars on it and some bumpers on the side because you're going to fall off a lot. And you need to have opportunities to practice that in an environment where the consequences for failure are very, very low, or else you'll never actually. Now, the example kind of falls apart because nobody would ever want to ride a backward bicycle. It's a ridiculous thing to do. In the case of AI, actually, this is a thing that like demonstrably, right? Like you look at any one of a number of, business models, retail, right? Like why is Amazon eating the world right now? Well, it's because when I have an issue with a package that got delivered, their customer service process has been completely designed around the power of AI, and it is vastly more efficient and better as an experience than what anybody in a traditional retailer is doing, right? If the package didn't show up, I go on my mobile phone and my Amazon app and I say, hey, my package didn't show up. And I don't even ever have to talk to a person. It makes an AI-driven decision about like, oh, is Charlie a fraudster based on a million factors that are getting fed into a model? And if it determines that I'm not, it just takes care of the problem automatically. And the thing that I was hoping for comes the next day instead, right? Like so they've completely rethought about how they design the processes, but they had to be very purposeful in terms of drilling the way that work gets done through people who understood retail to make that change happen.
Many, if not most boards challenged their senior leadership team to put some sort of point of view, if not strategy, heading into 2024 around AI. And I got to tell you, from the teams that we've been interacting with, the senior management teams are still just trying to figure out exactly what this AI thing is. I mean, listen, we sit here and talk about, we've been doing AI for decades, and machine learning, predictive analytics been around for a long time, but now it's this generative AI thing. But oh, by the way, just so you know, there's huge cultural implications to people now. Really going to a mental place where they lean into being augmented by this, supportive intelligence and the new ways of doing. It just goes to show you that when Gartner talks about the hype cycle, we know we were at peak hype in 2023. And what comes right after that is a trough of disillusionment because of everything that we're talking about here. It's hard getting people to change. How do you actually make this thing it's incorporated where it's sticky? How do you create the psychological safety environment for people to experiment and learn and celebrate the learning that comes from when they get it wrong. And it does, I think, Charlie, beg the question in this strategic discussion as management teams have thought about this year, to what extent are they connected and aware of the significance of this change that we're talking about and empowering across the C-suite and the teams that support them to put the conditions in place to start this, as Jennifer says, to start this experimentation in a way that allows people to celebrate the learning that comes from even when they get it wrong.
I mean, the good news is I observe so many boards and executive teams, who get that this is real, right? I mean, like it's, we're at the moment where if you've played with ChatGPT or Bard, I don't think there's a way that where previously like data science and machine learning and stuff kind of felt like it didn't have that face. It didn't have that thing that like you could go directly play with. I mean, the face of it is just to your point, it's the technology behind large language models. It's been around for a while. And I've seen stuff, but to have it be available, you open up a web page or an app and I can talk into my phone and say, I was telling you guys I had strep throat, a week and a half ago. And over New Year's, I was trying to figure out, well, am I allowed to have a cocktail while I'm on this antibiotic? And, I asked ChatGPT, took me 3 seconds, and I got a really thorough response that was, yes, you're allowed to have a cocktail, citing the Mayo Clinic and National Institutes of Health research. And I could click on the articles. I mean, like anybody who's played with this, I think you'd have to be an idiot not to get that this is a huge game-changing deal, right? So it's like, that was the problem 5 or 10 years ago where people would go, yeah, it's data and analytics stuff. I don't know. Is it really all that, I think now because it has that face, what I'm seeing is everybody gets it. Look, getting this right necessarily starts with a strategic discussion. Most organizations, they go, okay, what can we do with AI, right? Solution chasing problem. How often has that worked in any domain, right? That's not how it goes. You got to start with the business problem. And then what's lacking in that room, because an abysmal number of executive teams are digitally savvy. I mean, this is something that gets measured, and there are a few different studies that like measure the digital wherewithal of individual executives and teams. Something like fewer than 10% of executive leadership teams across businesses would qualify as sufficiently digitally savvy to be able to make strategic digital decisions, right? I can tell you with absolute certainty that we're going to see companies create strategic roles. I'm already seeing the beginning of this, and you're going to see that continue to heighten. And frankly, what's going to reinforce it, and I believe this is more true than the CIO revolution, is that you're also going to see a lot of businesses that choose not to just fail to be relevant anymore. Because I think it's that big a shift, right? I mean, you're just not going to be able to afford to operate at scale. Maybe if you're a mom and pop shop and you're all about, my local relationships and stuff, great. Like there's going to be room for that always, right? Yeah. But like for big scaled brand businesses, the scale game, you can't win unless you are harnessing this stuff going forward. You can't.
Well, you get left in the dust basically because everybody else should be. Yeah.
It's a certainty. It's Gary Kasparov playing chess 20 years ago. It's the game of, just if you're not seeing that, then I feel bad for you, but you're not going to be along for this world.
for those that are listening and watching us, I think this is really insightful to get the inside scoop from somebody like you, Charlie. So thank you so much. Really
Well,
great.
let's
A
let's
pleasure to
hope the
be here.
world settles down a little bit, and 2024, has just even a small degree of sanity to it. Okay.
I think we'll get there.